Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, December the 11th, 2018. It's 8 a.m. New York time, 5 p.m. Los Angeles time, 1 p.m. London time, and in Sydney, Australia, it's 12 midnight. Thank you, wherever you are in the world, for tuning in and listening to the live stream. If you're listening to the live stream, if you're listening to the podcast recording, thank you too. We love you as well. We are once again recording to the Facebook group, and we're going to be doing another exploration of Neville Goddard, but it's also a bit of a Q&A too. So if you have questions and you're listening to the live stream, don't hesitate to jump in. In fact, Cindy, it makes me think there was a question that came up yesterday in one of the podcasts that we did. One of the listeners was asking a question about how Neville describes God and how he particularly describes God as imagination. And what does that mean, and how do we understand that, and so forth? And I felt like I was getting a quiz after all of the study we've done of Neville. But it was all good. But I figured let's bring the expert in, because you're the one who originated and created the Neville decoder ring. So tell us, what do you think? How do you see it? This whole question of God and imagination. How do you make sense out of that? Because for somebody who has a strong religious background, that can be pretty confusing.
Well, I think that Neville's explanation of it's actually very simple. It is that he equates the creative function of God as creator, he equates that with our imagination. Mm-hmm. In other words, he says that our imagination is the creative faculty, mm-hmm. and the only creative faculty. I mean, he says, I think in one of the chapters that we covered last week, that this is the only thing that creates is our imagination, and he says, and your imagination is God. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say it so directly sometimes, because he uses verses from the Christian Bible. And that's the part I think that can be confusing, because first of all, many people have heard those verses over and over and had them described to them or understand them to mean a certain thing, mm-hmm. that is not that.
Right.
And then so Neville throws the verse out, and he'll throw it out sort of as proof. In other words, he'll be talking about the, creative function of the imagination, and then he'll throw this verse out, Christ in you, the hope of glory. And it's like, he's like, see? And you're like, what?
Just to see if you're paying attention, I think.
This is what I'm talking about, that God is the creative function in you. This is God, your imagination. And I understand that for a lot of people, it makes sense that would be a little either confusing or just hard to swallow, because it's not what they've believed. It's not what they've been taught. It might not mesh with their own beliefs that they hold, and those beliefs are often powerful and sacred and, mm-hmm. Private and personal. So that's one of the things that when we started covering Neville, I was a little nervous about, because I thought, well, I'm just going to have to put these disclaimers out there and say, and say what I really hold to be true to this day. And that is, if we took every reference to God or the Bible out of Neville's books, you would still come away with Neville's message.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, very true.
Now, some people may say, no, don't take those out. That's what I like about Neville, and that's fine too. I think mm-hmm. there's people all across the spectrum of that. Some people love it. Some people aren't crazy about it. Some people are confused by it.
Mm-hmm. Including yourself.
It is what it is. That was Neville. So
yeah.
It's just the way he teaches.
It is. I think you're right too. The challenging part is how it challenges beliefs. I remember when I was growing up, the way that I grew up in a Presbyterian church, and that church taught, it was fairly doctrinal. It was fairly consistent with what many churches do. They taught the idea that you connect to God within, but you were not God. God is the creator. It's the separate being. It's the overlord. God is the Father. God is the one who created all of us. That's the general message. Not that we are God, and that's where it gets challenging with Neville, because we're elevating, or Neville is elevating, or somebody is elevating us to godhood, and that strikes at the heart of many religions and says, "Oh, no, 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 you can't. That's not the way it is. God is above us. God is the one that we worship."
Exactly. Now, a friend of mine said the imagination is where we meet the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always liked that idea. And I think that idea is true. And then we can push it a little farther into Neville territory and say that that's where we meet ourselves, that we are the divine. Some people like to believe or choose to believe that we all have a spark of divinity within us. Mm-hmm. It's like the saying that you hear, the Sanskrit word namaste. It literally means the light within me, or the divinity within me, recognizes and honors the divinity within you.
Oh.
So it's a very nice word, a beautiful concept.
Yeah.
But there's that line of whether, do I just have a spark of divinity, or am I divine? Or is part of me literally God, right? I mean, I think that's where Neville goes with it. So I hope that answers the question. Something that's been a kind of big, powerful thing in my life was years ago recognizing that I get to choose what to believe. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. I think for a long time I had this idea that, this is what I believe. Yep. And that those things can't change. It's like, this is the way I was brought up, or this is what I was taught. These are my beliefs. This is what my family believes. This is what I believe. And years ago, one day I realized I get to choose what to believe. And I can believe something. Some people will say, we might feel like, I can't believe that. Not that it's wrong, but maybe that it's just impossible. Maybe that my mind I just can't fathom it. I can't believe that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if we want to believe it, we can, whatever it is.
That's true.
It's like thoughts create things. When we first learn that may be earth-shattering to us.
Tell me about it, yeah.
Right? But at some point we can say, I'm just choosing to believe that. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't work out for me to choose a particular thing and believe it, then I can change those beliefs. Mm-hmm. We have that ability.
Which is a great thing.
It's a privilege. Yeah. So.
And by the way, we actually have we don't have a question, but we have a first comment about what we've been talking about here from somebody who I know was at yesterday afternoon's podcast, which I think is where we were discussing this. But his name is Siraj, and he says, I think it depends on whether you are believing in God or the devil. What we believe, thoughts go in that direction. If I'm wrong, then please correct me. And he's got his hands together like that.
Well, I'm not here to really correct anyone because of what we just talked about. We get to believe what we want to believe.
Exactly.
We get to choose our own beliefs. So what's right and feels right for one person might not for someone else. Mm-hmm. Some of us don't believe in a personal devil. So there's that, right? And some religious systems don't believe in a devil.
True. Yeah.
But what I want to hear you saying, what I think that you're saying is that our thoughts, whether they're leaning towards what we feel is good and right and true, or if they're leaning towards what we don't, which Neville often refers to as evil. I think in the past few chapters, Neville's talked about evil. And there's a part of me that when I hear that word, it does lean towards those teachings that come about in some religions about evil, about the devil, and about demons, and about. Right. But really, when Neville uses it, he's just talking about anything we don't want.
Yes.
Or thoughts that aren't kind, right? It's like he talked about thinking thoughts about someone else that pulls out the smallness, I think he said, of the person, right? It's like when we dwell on faults, when we nitpick or we find fault with others, those things would be what he would put in that category of evil. So we have focus on the things that are good and right and true, or we can focus on the problems that we're having, the worries that we have, the fears that we have, the uncomfortable things, the smallness of ourselves and others. And when we do that, then absolutely, then we start creating, in that direction.
And
So we can divide it between God and the devil, but that doesn't work for everybody's worldview.
No, it doesn't.
Or everybody's.
No, I mean, and I personally don't really believe in the devil, although I do believe in kind of a modified version of it. If you will follow my thinking for a moment, because I think about it as something that humans create, and the reason I like that a lot is because I remember when I was growing up being told by the church fathers of the church that I was in that that was not correct. You know, the devil actually exists. It isn't, man is not the creator. The devil was just part of creation in general. But I also remember other church fathers who said, "Oh yeah, that's absolutely correct." So I was getting double messages in the same church, which is really interesting. And I leaned toward the second group more. And as I thought about it and talked about it with them, I realized that even they weren't quite getting the full measure of their concept, because they agreed that humans create the devil, so to speak, just by choosing stuff we don't like. That's the way we would express it. That's not the way they would express it. They would have expressed it in terms of just by choosing to do bad things, or choosing evil, or choosing having evil thoughts. That's the way they would have thought about it. But I don't think they really grasped how powerful the concept was, because what it implied was humans create.
Yes.
It's like, you can't create a devil unless you can create. And
right.
That means you can create either way,
Right. And this is true. And we even see this in the mainstream world,
mm-hmm.
that when we're not talking about things that are esoteric or religious or nebulous, like the law of attraction, right? Things we can't see. But when we talk about just the mainstream world that we look at, we see people creating, the world creating angels and devils, the world creating powers.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in the political sense of power, but in the marketing sense of power.
Sure.
Thought forms.
Mm-hmm.
We create thought forms.
That's true.
And so they can be looked at that way, that they actually have power. Think about how powerful the thought form of Santa Claus is.
Right.
For instance.
Yep. Oh yeah. Right? Especially in the West.
This time
sure.
of year, the Christmas spirit, right? Mm-hmm. Santa has a fan club. I mean, there are people that
I love that.
There are many people that love this time of year for that one aspect, and they want to be in the Christmas spirit, so to speak.
Yep.
And it's just a thought form.
It is.
Thought form that kind of has the ability to create itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this conversation, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to this stuff.
Now, speaking of a lot to this stuff, we have another comment from another listener, Shireen, who's also a regular listener, and she is reporting something going on with her. She says, "Good news, at last.
Yes.
I am focusing on what I want more and more, despite panic attacks and some anxiety. I want me back and stronger, and I still have faith in life." Now, she asks a question: how can I overcome my anxiety attacks? Please advise. But first of all, congratulations! You're making progress. That's fabulous.
Wow. Well, here's the thing about anxiety, and I am not a doctor, and I cannot give you any kind of medical advice. And
right.
I think Walt would say the same thing.
Absolutely.
But one thing I know about anxiety is that here is the explanation that I've given before, and it sounds weird, but those little smoke alarms that you have on your ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So my smoke alarm is fairly close to my kitchen. And if I make a pizza in the oven, my smoke alarm inevitably is probably going to go off before the pizza gets done, before I can turn the oven off and have the whole ordeal over with, right? And so it's because my smoke alarm thinks there's a fire.
Right.
But it's just a pizza.
Right.
And when we have anxiety, sometimes that's what's happening in our body. Our body is giving us an alarm about something because, our body, our brain, whatever, is thinking that the house is on fire. And really, man, I'm just making a pizza over here. It's like, it's not that bad, right? So anxiety is a heightened symptom of alarm when it's not really necessary. And a lot of times it's connected, I think, to adrenals.
Absolutely.
Adrenaline, right? An adrenaline spike.
Oh, yeah.
Because when our adrenaline spikes, it prepares us to fight, fly, or freeze. So it's fight or flight or freeze. And that was really useful. And it is really useful. Like, we need adrenaline. It's a good thing that we have
Absolutely.
the adrenal system. But we're not all running from tigers all the time.
Right.
And when we have our adrenal system spiking our adrenaline all the time, which it does because we live in a world that's so much is going on. When you're driving down the road and the car in front of you stops fast and you have to slam on your brakes, adrenal spike.
Absolutely.
We have situations all day long where things like this happen. And so part of it is like the recognition of that, like realizing it's just a pizza in the oven. It's not the house on fire. And then the other thing is exactly what you're doing is awesome. Like focusing on what you want.
Yeah.
Because when we start worrying about things and focusing on what we don't want, adrenal spike. I mean, really.
Yeah, it's bad enough that we're attracting the wrong stuff, but we also get an adrenal spike that says, run for the hills. We get both. It's like, oh my God.
Right? Yeah, it's like a double whammy. So I think that's wonderful that you're finding yourself focusing on what you want more than what you don't want. I know that when I have those experiences, they're very, very obvious to me. Like, suddenly I will realize, yes, this is it. I'm doing this. I am focusing on what I want. And it changes your body chemistry.
Oh, it does. And it changes your life, too.
That's all this is when we have anxiety, depression, a lot of it, it's connected to our body chemistry. Think of how people feel when they fall in love.
True. Yep.
Right? They're on cloud nine. They don't need to eat or sleep, or it's like everything is wonderful. It's like, it's body chemistry.
It is.
Body chemistry is a powerful thing.
The endorphins are just truly an amazing thing, for sure. I can add on to your story, by the way, to your example of cooking the pizza in the oven, because we have a similar situation. Anytime that we grill anything in the oven, the smoke alarm goes off. And in fact, we have stations. Louise is in the kitchen tending to it. I'm at the smoke alarm with something to wave the smoke away from it. And meanwhile, the cats, as soon as the alarm goes off, the cats head for the hills. I was like, find the farthest point in the house to get away from the alarms that's safe, And that's my point.
I'm thankful that our smoke alarm is that our ceilings are not 20 feet tall because,
Yeah, that'd be a little bit hard to wave the smoke away from.
Well, we can get on a step ladder and just unhook the smoke alarm for 10 minutes and then put it back if we have to. When you have a house where your smoke alarm is, 10 feet over your head, you have to break out the big ladder.
That's right,
that would be a pain.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But the point that I was trying to raise is that with my cats running away, the cats don't understand what's going on with the grill. In fact, all they know is whenever they hear a sizzle sound coming from the direction of the stove, they head for the hills. It's been so ingrained in them that there's going to be a smoke alarm going off that they don't even wait. And basically what that means is they don't understand that it's just something grilling in the oven.
Exactly.
And that's the point you were talking about. We can understand that. We have that ability to understand. It's just a pizza. It's just something we're grilling. It's just food that's being cooked. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So we can actually convince ourselves, hey, it's not a big deal that the smoke alarm went off. So what? We know what's going on.
Right. That's why deep breathing is so important. Remember that shallow breathing is actually a symptom of stress. And so when we recognize we're getting anxious, there are a lot of things that we can do that are pretty simple that will help. And breathing deep is one of them.
Absolutely.
Breathing deep, asking ourselves, is this really serious? What's going on here? And taking a moment instead of allowing ourselves to, you can feel it in your body when you have anxiety. To me, it feels a lot like resistance. A clenching feeling. It's a constriction. So those deep breaths help a lot. And
They
drinking
really
up water.
That's right. Yeah.
Sometimes they're really simple things that we need to remember to do to take care of ourselves. It's true.
The water is just amazing what that can do to just fix things that it doesn't seem like it should be able to fix, but it does. It's just amazing. It's one of the,
There's a book that I read once written by a doctor who says that a lot of the things that we take as normal signs of aging, like people say, what are some normal signs that you believe are attached to aging? Well, arthritis, and they'll name these symptoms, and he says that he believes they are actually a result of chronic dehydration. So it's not like one time, it's not like when you hear the story of the guy on the raft, that got lost at sea and went 48 hours without water. It's not that. It's going every single day for 30 years with just a little less water than we actually need. It's
insufficient,
chronic.
Right.
And I have spoken to people before that have said, well, I don't get thirsty. And they gauge whether they need water by whether they feel thirsty. So they say, well, I don't drink a lot of water, but I'm never thirsty. Well, eventually your body just stops telling you it's thirsty when every time it tells you you don't give it water, right? So I had a friend here the other day that said to me, he had this big water bottle that he just takes everywhere with him, and I was kind of teasing him about it because it's huge. It's a huge water bottle. It's like a gallon of water lugging around.
Oh my God, yeah.
And a bunch of people were here, and he had left the water thing, and I said, oh no. And the next day, he told me that when he didn't have it, that he started finding himself just thirsty all the time. And he said, I never used to get thirsty. I said, well, you're used to being hydrated now.
Right.
So your body says, hey, I'm not hydrated, right?
Exactly.
Before, it wasn't an issue because you didn't care and you weren't paying attention to the thirst anyway. So paying attention, opening our awareness, it's actually a really good strategy for law of attraction, believe it or not. Because when we start becoming aware of thirst, of adrenaline spike, of an anxiety attack, when we start becoming aware of those things, our awareness gets more sensitive, and we start becoming also aware of where we are on the emotional scale.
True. Yeah.
We start becoming aware of our own thoughts and catching them earlier when they're thoughts that are not leaning in the direction that we want. And so it's actually a really good exercise it's mindfulness practice. Really.
Yep. Well, and even if we don't have a symptom like thirst, usually, I found anyway, even if we're not feeling thirst, there are other signs that we get from our own body saying that we need water. I mean, for me, my mouth starts to feel dry. My lips start to feel cracked. I don't necessarily feel thirsty. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But it's still a reminder, time to take some water in. And so I do. And like you say, as long as you continue to pay attention to the signals, the signals will get stronger and more consistent over time. And they have, for me. So I agree with you completely.
Other thing, and I think Neville talks about this somewhere, but the other thing is that if we ascribe to the idea that the universe is a mirror, mirroring back to us our level of self-love, well, then it does us a service to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And that's little things like that, getting enough sleep, getting enough water, paying attention to how we're feeling with a loving intention, a self-love intention that I care about myself and I'm taking good care of myself. The universe will start mirroring that back to you and sending blessings your way, helping. Because, there's an idea that I like to explain to people that the universe is always supporting me. And I've had people say, well, I don't feel like the universe is supporting me, right? Because things are going wrong in their life or things are uncomfortable in their life. And what I mean by that is that the universe supports our story. The universe supports whatever whatever story we're telling.
Absolutely,
and so if we're telling a story that nothing ever works out for me, well, the universe will support that. Then we say, I don't feel like the universe is supporting me. Nothing's working out. But if we're telling a different story and we're taking good care of ourselves, then that gets reflected too. So that's
true.
Kind of important.
That's true. We've had actually a couple more comments from Siraj. We'll get his comments in here, and then we'll get to the book, because we did promise we were going to talk about Neville's book today, so we should probably get to that. But Siraj says, "Sir, ma'am, please guide something about a midlife crisis, how to get out of this situation immediately using the law of attraction, because we have a lot to do in our rest life. I think in the rest of our life, want to make sure the rest of the life is the best of the life." And this is actually a topic we addressed yesterday because he's feeling frustrations. He's dealing with a number of things in his life that are making him feel kind of trapped and like he doesn't have any opportunity to climb out of them. So I addressed the concept yesterday, but why don't you give it a shot, Cindy? Why don't you talk to him about how do you deal with a midlife crisis?
Well, it's the same way you deal with any kind of situation that you're in. First, recognize that you're in the right place at the right time doing the right thing, and that there are no mistakes. And take a deep breath and recognize that you've come a long way from wherever you were, and you have a long way to go probably too, because we never get it done. It never ends. So enjoy the ride and, trust the process. You're in the right place.
It's a good point, because when we trust the ride, I like your phrase, when we realize that we're in the right place, even when things aren't going the way we want to, when we just trust it and when we start finding what's good about it, it changes. It morphs into what we want it to be instead of what we don't want it to be. And that's hard to remember when we're in the middle of it, especially if it's a really difficult situation. That's hard to remember. But it's true. If we can find a way to enjoy what's going on and focus on the parts that are really good, things turn around for us.
And recognize that, the clock never stops.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, things are going to keep moving and things are going to change because change is constant in nature. So, hang in there.
And I also liked the other thing that you kind of said quickly. You kind of skipped past it, but I know what you were saying. Be gentle with yourself. And that's been my message to keep reinforcing to myself over and over again for the last 10 days or so. Be gentle with yourself, Walt. Be gentle with yourself. Don't keep beating yourself up. Don't. Oh, geez, I can't believe I did that. Don't do that. If it doesn't work out right, it's the Neville message, right? Neville talked about his definition of what sin is. That is just missing the mark. You just missed. That's all. So you change your aim. That's all. No big deal.
That's right. And do it with loving kindness.
Exactly.
Be gentle with yourself. Like you said, I think about the way we treat an animal or a small child. Mm-hmm. We would never, hopefully,
yes,
be not giving our pet water for days on end or dragging our small child out. No, we'll do it, later. No, It's like we take care of someone who can't take care of themselves with a certain level of gentleness and kindness, and we can take care of ourselves the same way. So
exactly.
Be gentle with yourself. Take care of yourself. Show yourself love and trust the process.
That's it. That's exactly it. So with that lead in, let's dive into doing a little Neville, although first I should do our announcements since we're about halfway through the show. So just a reminder, if you're not yet a subscriber to the podcast, please become one. I mean, if you're listening to the live stream, that's great, and we love you for doing that. But that doesn't mean you can't also be a subscriber, just in case you miss a live stream event. And the links for the subscription are found in the description of the live stream. So just click on one of the links, the one that's appropriate for your device, and it will just walk you right through the process. If you don't find a link, you'll find them on the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. It's pretty easy to do. And then once you're a subscriber, and for all of our existing subscribers too, we ask you to keep putting out there, keep putting on social media that you're listening. Each time that you listen to an episode, just share the fact that you've been doing it so that more and more people will find out about it. Because chances are that's how you found out. Somebody posted something, you saw it, and you followed up and said, oh, this is pretty cool, I'm going to listen to this stuff. And so you did. Well, pass it along, because other people need to get that daily dose of happy as well. So subscribe and share, and thank you for being a member of our listener community, because we really appreciate you.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So let's see.
We are in chapter 16.
16. There we are. 16. It's a short one, too. Really short chapter.
Well, good, because we've already been answering questions. We might even get through a full chapter and then get to another chapter, and that would be amazing, right?
I think we have a good shot, because chapter 16 is one page in the book. Chapter 17 is 2 pages in the book. I think we got a shot. We have a good chance.
So we're working our way through Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness. Chapter 16, the chapter title is Personal Impotence. He says self-surrender is essential, and by that is meant the confession of personal impotence. I can of mine own self do nothing. Since creation is finished, it's impossible to force anything into being. The example of magnetism previously given is a good illustration. You cannot make magnetism. It can only be displayed. You cannot make the law of magnetism. If you want to build a magnet, you can do so only by conforming to the law of magnetism. In other words, you surrender yourself or yield to the law. In like manner, when you use the faculty of assumption, you are conforming to a law just as real as the law governing magnetism. You can neither create nor change the law of assumption. And it is in this respect that you are impotent. You can only yield or conform. And since all of your experiences are the result of your assumptions, consciously or unconsciously, the value of consciously using the power of assumption surely must be obvious. Willingly identify yourself with that which you most desire, knowing that it will find expression through you. Yield to the feeling of the wish fulfilled and be consumed as its victim, then rise as the prophet of the law of assumption. Now, I think something's interesting here because we talk, obviously, pretty often about how important it is, the value that we are consciously creating, not just unconsciously creating. But we often frame it as that we, with the knowledge that we are powerful creators.
Mm-hmm.
And Neville is saying that we're powerless here, in a way, right?
In a way.
Because
this is where the Neville decoder ring really comes in handy with a chapter like this, because you have to be able to do some decoding in order to understand what he's talking about.
Right. So he's not saying that we have no power.
Right.
Because we have great power, or there is great power there in the law of assumption, if we will yield to it. If we will recognize that our most important work is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It's not trying to force anything to happen. And I think that energetically, that's what happens a lot of times when we hear those messages, or maybe we have it happen with ourselves where we're like, it's not happening. I'm doing all the things, and where's my thing? Why isn't my thing coming to me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing all the right things, and that is resistance.
Yes.
And so he talks here about we cannot make the law, and we can't fit it. And I think that that's the most important message here in this chapter is trusting the process. We were just talking about that, right? That's what trusting the process is.
That's right.
We relax. We know, it's in this last sentence, he says, willingly identify yourself with that which you most desire, knowing it will find expression through you. So we know that it's going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And that knowledge allows us to relax and stop resisting, stop trying to force anything. What pops out for you in this chapter, Walt?
Well, that's it right there. And when you were describing, I thought your description was really good about what the distinction is when he talks about as being impotent or powerless. I was thinking about a comic strip character, any comic strip character, some character that has a superpower of some kind. And you just have this you can imagine this frame of the cartoon where the character is dealing with some bad guy and he holds his hand up and fire shoots out of his hand and flies at the enemy and destroys the enemy or something like that. And that's often the way we think about trying to use something like the law of attraction. I will use my powers to to make things happen. And no, Neville's saying that's not the way it works. You don't do it into being. You are not the one who's just generating this tremendous power. The power is within you, but it's also you're attached and you're part of a stream of it. It's not just you all by yourself, unique. Not that there's anything wrong with being yourself and unique. That's a perfectly good thing. It's just that's not where your power is. Your power is in your connection to that stream of source energy that we're all connected to. And it's a good reminder.
Well, that's a good reminder too about us all being connected.
Mm.
You know that I do a product that leads people through the lunation cycle.
Right,
and
right.
One of the things is on the new moon, it's a great time to make an intention, and that's how this is all connected. The things I do often connected with the law of attraction is that there's a timeline that we use to frame our work. And so the new moon was Friday. And I keep a magical diary of sorts where I write my new moon intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep track of them, and I can look back and see what they were and see how they've come to pass. And it's a wonderful thing to do, because with law of attraction, it's so easy that we have these wins and then we forget them.
Oh,
so
that's a good idea.
Being able to go back, right? But Friday, I didn't have an intention. I just didn't have a clear intention of what an intention to make on the new moon. But on Saturday, the Notes from the Universe, Mike Dooley's Notes from the Universe.
I love them.
Well, a friend of mine had a big, big win, and she had forgotten. You know how sometimes the Notes from the Universe will have something personal in there for you that you program in?
Oh, yeah.
She had forgotten the thing that she had put in there, and when she got the note that had the thing in there, her personal thing in there, she realized it had already happened. And so it was like a really big win and a big reminder. And so I went over and I changed my thing on the email to be something different.
Oh.
And it was kind of like, oh, what should I put in here? Oh, I'll just put this. This sounds good. This is something I want to do. Well, then 2 other people mentioned me doing that thing in the next 24 hours out of the blue. So suddenly I had a very clear intention, right? But how did it happen? It wasn't just within me. We're all connected. And the synchronicities came through other people reaching out and saying something to me. And I think that's important for us to remember, is that we're co-creating. We're not just doing this all by ourselves.
This is true.
Not that you can't, right? I mean, not that you can't. Certainly there are times when you will have a thought and you will manifest something, and it maybe didn't involve others, but usually it involves others, even indirectly somehow. So it's a good thing to remember.
It is. I think it's also useful to remember that we do have the superpower, in the sense that we are the ones who are responsible for choosing what thoughts we're going to choose. Which is,
yes.
It's actually a superpower in the sense of a super responsibility. Because, because that, I mean, no one else can think our thoughts for us. And there have been times I kind of wish that people could. just because I was struggling at times, like, I can't seem to get there. Will somebody else please think this thought for me? Because I can't get there. But
we do. I mean, that's how we support each other, right?
Yeah.
And even here, we've had people even today ask the question, how do I deal with this? And,
right.
I mean, I think it's wonderful that we can support each other that way.
Exactly.
Because you're right. When we're at the bottom of the emotional scale, sometimes it's really hard to see our way out. And it's hard to think of what to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's funny. Like, people call me all the time because, friends and family, because if they have some symptom, they often know that I've studied, nutritional healing for a long time. I'm not a doctor, but they'll call me for, a remedy for something. What can you do for this? Or what does this symptom mean? Should I see a doctor? What do you think? And it's so funny because when I'm the one that's sick, I can't think of a thing. I'm like, what do you do for us soldiers again?
Yeah, right.
It's like, when it's us, it's hard. So we all help each other.
Absolutely.
That way. Last chapter, 16, being on powerlessness, on impotence, look what chapter 17.
Yeah, we're looking at the other side of the coin next. All things are possible. So, yeah. All right, so let's do 17.
So Neville says it's of great significance that the truth of the principles outlined in this book have been proven time and again by the personal experiences of the author. Throughout the past 25 years, he has applied these principles, and he's speaking in the third person here.
Yeah, I have to say that I wish he had written it the other way. I know that was an appropriate way of writing for his time period, but to me, there's like something hoity-toity about writing about yourself in the third period, or the third person, rather.
He says, throughout the past 25 years, he has applied these principles and proved them successful in innumerable instances. He attributes to an unwavering assumption of his wish already being fulfilled every success that he has achieved. He was confident that by these fixed assumptions, his desires were predestined to be fulfilled. Time and again, he assumed the feeling of his wish fulfilled and continued in his assumption until that which he desired was completely realized. Live your life in a sublime spirit of confidence and determination. Disregard appearances, conditions, in fact, all evidence of your senses that deny the fulfillment of your desire. Rest in the assumption that you are already what you want to be, for in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity, and with your infinite being, and in parentheses he says God, all things are possible. Now, doesn't this sound like when Abraham is talking about our higher self?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me Abraham's term. Is it higher being?
They refer to it a number of ways. They refer to it as source. They refer to it as the inner being.
Source. Okay.
Yeah. I've also heard them refer to as higher being, although that's lesser. But usually it's either source or inner being.
Okay, inner being. That's what it was. So I believe that Neville is speaking of the exact same part of us.
Absolutely.
Here, when he says your infinite being, and then he says God,
mm-hmm.
and then he says God never fails.
Mm.
For who can stay his hand or say to him, "What doest thou?" Through the mastery of your assumptions, you are in very truth enabled to master life. It is thus that the ladder of life is ascended. Thus the ideal is realized. The clue to the real purpose of life is to surrender yourself to your ideal with such awareness of its reality that you begin to live the life of the ideal and no longer your own life as it was prior to this surrender. He calleth things that are not seen as though they were, and the unseen becomes seen. Each assumption has its corresponding world. If you are truly observant, you will notice the power of your assumptions to change circumstances which appear wholly immutable. You, by your conscious assumptions, determine the nature of the world in which you live. Ignore the present state and assume the wish fulfilled. Claim it. It will respond. The law of assumption is the means by which the fulfillment of your desires may be realized. Every moment of your life, consciously or unconsciously, you are assuming a feeling. You can no more avoid assuming a feeling than you can avoid eating and drinking. All you can do is control the nature of your assumptions. Thus, it is clearly seen that the control of your assumption is the key you now hold to an ever-expanding, happier, more noble life.
Interesting.
Here's what I think is interesting here.
Go ahead.
You can
Go ahead.
no more avoid assume a feeling. So we're always, every moment of your life, he says, consciously or unconsciously, we're assuming a feeling.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that ties into what I was going to say. In a chapter, All Things Are Possible, the second paragraph, live your life in a sublime spirit of confidence and determination. Disregard appearances, conditions, in fact, all evidence of your senses that deny the fulfillment of your desire. And when you read that, I was thinking to myself, just this morning, and this is actually, something that has happened many, many, many times. This morning, I was trying to focus on my desires, on the things that I want, and take my mind off the things that I don't want. And it was a bit of a challenge. A few things I've been dealing with in my life. I have a new symptom. We talked about the importance of symptoms and the messages that they're trying to send. Well, my newest symptom is I've been doing so much computer work that I've got the evidence of carpal tunnel in my right hand, so that my right hand and arm are getting sore from just using mice all the time, using computer mice. So I'm actually giving them a rest over the last couple of days. But that's just like one more thing, right? One more thing piled on top of the other things that I've been dealing with lately. And so when I woke up this morning, even though when we wake up, that's usually the time when we're most easily able to connect to being in true alignment with ourselves, being in that positive space, I found myself struggling. And I was struggling to actually get into the feeling of that wish fulfilled. And when I was doing that struggling, I was thinking to myself, why is this so hard? Because you talked about it, how you give all this advice to everybody in your family and your friends and so forth about alternative things they can do to treat symptoms and illnesses and so forth. And yet when you get a sore throat, you can't remember any of it. Well, the same thing was happening with me. I was saying, I know all this stuff. Why am I having so much trouble focusing on the things that I want? And I actually was kind of pushing myself to work through a few of them and repeating some of the phrases that I'd come up with. I was, kind of dredging them up, and I wasn't feeling them at all. I wasn't feeling them at all. And I think that's a noteworthy point. I'm not even sure where to go with a conclusion on it, but I want to point out that when we are not in our best space, it's often really hard to get into that feeling space. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is if we can do it gently, and that ties back to the concept we talked about a moment ago about being really kind to ourselves. I think the way you described it was treat ourselves the way we would treat a small child or a small animal or something like that. If we can gently guide ourselves into, just keep going after it, even though you're not feeling it yet, just keep going after it, keep focusing on it. I know you're not feeling it, just keep going. Eventually you start to feel.
Right.
Start to feel.
If we stay with what we want,
Mm-hmm.
it will come. And also, to recognize if it's a physical thing, like you were talking about your hand from the mouse, or shoulder, whatever it is, but the idea of overuse, that our body is just talking to us,
Mm-hmm.
and telling us to slow down or telling us no. Right? It's
Absolutely.
like the idea that every symptom is a healing gesture has been really a powerful idea in my life.
Mm.
So that I don't freak out when there's some kind of symptom going on. I don't ignore it, but I recognize that that's my body is working on healing itself, and that's why this symptom is coming about. And my body is giving me some kind of message. So, get a trackball.
Well, actually, what I've been doing is I've been practicing using my left hand to do my mousing, and it's good practice, actually. It helps me.
Amazing. And you're going to tap into the right side of your brain doing that.
That's
and come
right.
up with all kinds of cool stuff.
This is true. But my wife pointed out to me, you can go onto your computer and you can change the settings so that the left button becomes the right button and the right button becomes the left button for using it as a left hand. And I said, yeah, I know you can do that, but you know what? I've learned to use it as left button, right button with my left hand, so I'm just going to go with that.
Yeah, because you might totally confuse yourself.
I probably would, yeah. But somehow I've managed to wire it, so that it does actually work, and wire it internally. I mean, so that the connection works just that way. So yeah, I was finding yesterday just by giving my right hand a rest, and I'm doing it today also, and just using my left hand and being patient with it. It was really slow at first. I was like painfully slow. Oh God, I'm so slow at operating this computer, but I started to acquire the skill. And I think I was acquiring the skill because, again, of what you talked about. I was kind to myself about it. I didn't expect myself to be really, really quick. Like, I'll just wait for myself to catch up. And I did. I caught up. I mean, I'm almost working as efficiently with my left hand now as I normally do with my right hand. And my right hand is saying, thank you very much. I feel better.
Right, exactly. Good deal.
And let's see. I think we have a few comments, too. I just wanted to take a look at those.
Oh, tell me.
Let's see, what do we got going on here? Suraj says, because we are all Avengers, we just have to use our superpowers. He picked up on the superpowers concept. That's good. I'm not sure what Nasha was responding to, but she said, this happens to the best doctors. And then she says, oh, seriously.
Probably, not being able to figure out your own stuff.
And I guess something we said really resonated because she says, oh, seriously, you spoke my heart out. I thought I was the only one. No, you're not the only one. That's another key thing, especially when we're studying this stuff, because we are dealing with a world of people who, for the most part, don't believe in what we're talking about here. And that can feel kind of lonely. So it is nice to know that there are other people who are thinking the same kinds of things and dealing with the same kinds of things. So I'm with you on that, Nasha. I know how that feels. I think we all do. And let's see, all the more comments are the same. Nasha says, she laughs out loud. She says, you are the first person I see as soon as I wake up. Well, thank you. That's funny. So I don't see any questions going on, just a lot of nice comments. So thank you for all the nice comments. Oh, Suraj says, got my solutions. We'll work it out. Thanks very much. So looks like
Excellent.
what we said earlier helped him a lot.
Well, this is what I love about this chapter. If we're, we talked at the very beginning of the show today and of the chapter actually before we even got into the book because of the question about God.
Right.
So if we're willing to take that leap and choose to agree with Neville or to entertain this idea that our infinite being, that our inner being, our higher, wiser self is actually God.
Mm-hmm.
This part where he says, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity, and with your infinite being, God, all things are possible.
Right.
God never fails.
God never fails, yeah.
If we will recognize that, even when we're in those hard places, even the midlife crisis places, right? Even the places where we're confused, even the places where we think we wish we were further along or we don't like something about our past or whatever, if we will realize that our inner being, our higher self never fails.
It's
That's
reassuring.
pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very reassuring. Because
right.
now we're truly not alone. I mean, it's great when we have the social connection, the community connection, because that way we reinforce each other and we co-create and so forth. But it's also great to know we've got that internal connection that we can always count on. It's 100% reliable all the time, no exceptions. That's a powerful thing.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
It's very comforting, I think.
Very. I agree.
To know that we can, as we continue on this journey, learning how to master our thought processes, learning how to master, gaining mastery of our emotions and of our feelings, which we have talked before about them being two different things, but recognizing the process of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
The better it is, right? The better we get at it, the faster it works. I mean, we talked about that, about the idea of timing and speed. And I think that the better we get at feeling, which is what we've been talking about, is that I remember you doing the mirror work at the beginning of the year and talking
right.
about really wanting to be able to amp up your feelings,
yep.
to expand them, to make them bigger.
Mm-hmm.
When we get good at that, it speeds up the process.
It does, very much so. Yeah, and it makes me realize I keep talking about this. I'm gonna have to get back to doing the mirror exercises because I've forgotten that was one of my goals. You're right, that was one of my goals, and it did help. And it makes me think I ought to get back to it for that reason alone, just because it does help in a big way. By the way, we have another question. We had a question earlier from Suraj. We now have a question also from Saroj, Saroj, who asks, what happens when your awareness becomes too challenging for some you are with? How do you handle this?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Basically, you have a partner in your life or you have someone you're close to, and your awareness and your expression of your awareness starts to challenge their belief system. So it creates a friction with them.
Oh, got it. So you mean like your own personal practice of conscious creation or law of attraction becomes
right.
challenging to someone because maybe their belief system is different?
They haven't specified that carefully, but yes, that's the way I interpret the question.
I think in situations like that it's, well, I can just say this. I've actually had some people in my life before that didn't really know what my beliefs were.
Mm.
And that have said to me, wow, how do you do this? Like, every time you turn around, I see you, having some miracle happen in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I wasn't talking about it a lot. I was just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the answer there. Because I think it's words that get us into trouble sometimes. I think that animosity you're talking about, or that stress, tension, whatever it is in the relationship that feels, I think it's showing up as resistance. That it sometimes comes from us trying to, because we're excited about what we believe and we want everyone to know this stuff and sometimes it happens because we're trying to convince someone else. And I think the easiest way and the best way and the most powerful way to convince someone is just by what you're doing, not what you're saying. Like, people will just see it unfolding in your life.
Yeah, I agree
and
with that.
That's hard to argue with when they're seeing if you want to get, Neville quotes verses a lot, the verse from the New Testament that says, they'll know you by your fruit. Right? You know a tree by its fruit. You see an apple tree and you don't wonder if it's an orange tree if it's loaded with apples. And
plus we have the power of assumption. I mean, that's what he was talking about here, the law of assumption, which is basically choosing your thoughts. Well,
right.
The same thing applies when you're dealing with somebody else who may or may not be receptive to them. Honestly, I've been discovering lately that I'm finding a lot of people I run into, but the vast majority of them are receptive to this whole idea that we label the law of attraction and deliberate creation. And that blows my mind, because there was a time when I thought that would be a really rare occurrence. Now it's an everyday occurrence. Why? Because I'm focusing positively on it for so much of the time.
Yes. So another Neville thing that he does that we've talked about is the pruning shears of revision.
Right.
So if you have a conversation with someone that feels tense, you can go back in your memory that night as you're, resting, and imagine that the conversation went a different way.
Sure.
We kind of call this time traveling or changing the past. We're not really changing the past. What we're changing is the energy around it, because we're changing the charge we have about what happened to feel different, because we're imagining that the conversation was more comfortable, that the conversation went in a nice, fluid way that felt good to both people. And when we do that, things start to shift. So that's my biggest recommendation right there, is the pruning shears of revision that Neville talks about.
It's a good point. Now, we got about 2.5 minutes left, and we've got a question that has come in that could take us an entire show, so we're going to have to be as concise as we can. But Herb asks, in assuming, let me read it the way he says it. In assuming, do you stop from feeling stupid when denying the senses? How do you ignore the ego?
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
Yeah, that could take an entire show to do that one.
Just trust the process. In other words, you just assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You just keep doing it. You keep going.
Yeah. And that's it. That is the essence of what faith is. It's keeping going despite what the evidence of your senses is telling you.
Absolutely. That's right. That's what it is.
Which is very strange.
It's easy.
It's like, I'm denying reality. I'm denying reality. That's what it feels like at times. But you just keep going anyway. You just keep going. And as you keep going, you start to build that belief. That's something that Abraham talks about a lot. A belief is a thought that you think over and over again. So take advantage of that. Keep thinking it over and over again. Even though the senses are telling you, no, that's not the way it is, just keep thinking it over and over again. Just keep going. And when you do, over time, that's how propaganda works. That's how people get propagandized. They hear the same thing over and over again.
This is why it's important to assume the feeling of the wish.
Yeah.
Because you want to build those feelings up.
Right.
Until they're more powerful than the feelings of your senses.
Mm-hmm. Exactly true. Well, first of all, thank you to all the people who listened to the live stream, because we had some good questions there. We have done a number of Neville shows where we didn't get a whole lot in the way of questions, but we had a lot of fun doing the book. This time we had questions that kind of that's like adding seasoning to a really good meal. So thank you for all the questions. Those are really good. And Cindy, before we say goodbye and reconnect tomorrow, tell people how they can reach out to you personally, because people do like to contact you, ask a question, and so forth. Some people even want to get coaching, but how do they reach out to you?
They can find me at my website, cindychavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ.com, and I would love to hear from you. Come
Excellent.
Shoot me an email and tell me hello.
So there you go. You've been invited. It's official now. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.